The Xel'Vorr descended from the sky like gods. Their ships, enormous obsidian monoliths, blotted out the sun, their sleek exteriors humming with power beyond human comprehension. Cities trembled beneath their arrival, a global broadcast crackling to life as the invaders made their first announcement. "We are the Xel'Vorr, warriors of the Dominion. Your resistance is amusing but futile. Surrender, and your extinction shall be swift. Fight, and you will suffer." For the first few hours, humanity believed they could mount a defense. The world's militaries mobilized, jets streaking across the sky, tanks rolling onto highways. But optimism shattered when the first plasma lances fell. Military bases, government headquarters, and communication centers turned to craters of molten ruin in an instant. Human weapons, despite their variety and firepower, proved laughably ineffective. Bullets sparked harmlessly against energy shields. Missiles veered off course, their guidance systems scrambled by alien jammers. In less than a day, the Xel'Vorr had turned Earth's strongest armies into scattered pockets of resistance. On the outskirts of what had once been a proud military outpost, Captain Alex Mercer watched from a ridge, the acrid scent of scorched metal and burning earth thick in the air. Through the scope of his rifle, he observed them, hulking figures in armor that pulsed with shifting hues, their helmets sleek and insectoid. They moved with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat. One of them, likely an officer, stood at the center of the battlefield. The creature's voice, guttural yet dripping with amusement, carried over the desolation. "Their weapons are sticks. Their warriors are insects. This world is a graveyard, and they are too foolish to lie down." The other Xel'Vorr warriors laughed, a deep, resonating sound that sent a chill through Mercer's spine. He had watched them before, seen them mock the dead and dying. They found joy in the suffering of lesser beings. Mercer exhaled slowly, adjusting the scope's magnification. The rifle in his hands was no miracle of modern warfare, just a custom-built, bolt-action sniper rifle chambered for .50 caliber rounds. A weapon from an era long past, designed to punch through vehicles, armor, and sometimes, when wielded correctly, arrogance. He studied the officer's stance, the way its weight shifted slightly with every movement. No obvious weak points, but he had learned something crucial. The energy shields flickered for the briefest moment when the aliens moved. Not much, but enough. Mercer slowed his breathing, felt the familiar stillness settle in. His heartbeat faded, the world narrowed to a single point, his crosshairs resting just beneath the officer's helmet. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle's roar shattered the silence, the recoil slamming against his shoulder. A split second later, the officer's head exploded in a violent burst of green ichor, fragments of its helmet spiraling through the air. The body crumpled, twitching, the laughter around it dying in an instant. For the first time, the Xel'Vorr hesitated. Mercer chambered another round, already selecting his next target. One of the warriors knelt, scanning the area, its 4 eyes flickering with confusion. Their technology should have detected the shot's origin, should have pinpointed the attack instantly. But they weren't fighting a plasma rifle or an energy beam. They were fighting physics, a force older than their entire empire. Another shot, another corpse. Panic spread. The warriors, so sure of their invincibility, turned their heads wildly, searching for an enemy they couldn't see. Mercer smirked, shifting positions. He knew better than to fire from the same spot twice. Sniping wasn't just about accuracy. It was about being a ghost, an unseen predator striking from the shadows. The Xel'Vorr barked orders in their strange, guttural tongue. He imagined the conversation. Asterisk, this shouldn't be possible. Our shields should be impenetrable. These primitive weapons shouldn't work. Asterisk. And yet, 2 of their own lay dead. Mercer crawled back, keeping low. The war was lost in conventional terms. Humanity had been outmatched from the beginning. But this was something different. This was asymmetric warfare. The Xel'Vorr thought themselves untouchable, superior in every way. They had studied humanity's technology, dissected their weapons, analyzed their tactics. But they hadn't accounted for one thing: a man with a rifle and a grudge. Mercer disappeared into the ruins, leaving the shaken warriors behind. The hunt had begun. The Xel'Vorr had never known fear. For all their conquests, all the worlds they had razed and civilizations they had reduced to dust, terror had always been a weapon they wielded, never one they endured. But now, standing amidst the bodies of their fallen, they felt it creeping in, an unfamiliar presence lurking beneath their hardened exteriors. They didn't understand. The humans had no plasma weapons capable of such precise, invisible kills. Their projectile weapons were crude, their soldiers undisciplined, their war machines obsolete. And yet, in the span of minutes, 2 Xel'Vorr warriors lay dead, struck down by an enemy they couldn't see, with a force they couldn't comprehend. Captain Alex Mercer lay prone on a ridge half a mile away, hidden beneath layers of debris and foliage, his rifle nestled against his shoulder. He watched through the scope as the aliens scrambled, their movements betraying uncertainty. They were scanning, tracking, searching, but they weren't hunters anymore. They were prey. One of them, taller than the rest, barked something in their guttural language, and a series of floating drones lifted into the air. Mercer watched as they hovered in erratic patterns, their optics scanning for heat signatures, motion, anything that might betray his position. He exhaled. Expected. Mercer had fought human wars before. He had watched as cutting-edge detection technology had been rendered useless by an enemy who understood terrain, patience, and deception better than any machine ever could. The Xel'Vorr were centuries ahead in technology, but decades behind in strategy. He shifted slightly, slow, deliberate. The key to remaining unseen wasn't just staying still, it was knowing when to move. The heat of his body had already begun blending with the ground beneath him, his thermal signature dulled by the makeshift insulation in his gear. He had positioned himself next to a charred vehicle, its smoldering remains masking the slight variations in temperature the drones might detect. Patience. One of the Xel'Vorr broke formation, stepping cautiously away from the others. Mercer watched its posture, the nervous way it moved. This one wasn't confident. It was reacting on instinct, gripping its weapon too tightly, head snapping in every direction. It didn't want to be here. That was a weakness. He adjusted his aim, aligning the reticle just beneath the creature's helmet, at the soft, exposed joint of its neck. A fraction of a second before he pulled the trigger, the alien seemed to hesitate, as if sensing its doom. Too late. The rifle cracked, the round covering half a mile in an instant. A heartbeat later, the alien's throat erupted in a spray of green, its body crumpling before it even knew it was dead. The others erupted into chaos. Mercer didn't stay to watch. He rolled backward, slipping into the underbrush, already moving to his next position. The worst thing a sniper could do was linger. Fire, displace, repeat. Make the enemy fight ghosts. He maneuvered through the ruined landscape, careful to avoid open ground. A sniper didn't need speed, he needed precision. His route was planned, escape points mapped out long before he had ever taken a first shot. He moved low, stepping where debris was thickest to muffle his footfalls. Behind him, the Xel'Vorr warriors regrouped, their panic hardening into anger. He heard them shouting orders, saw the drones weaving through the air, sweeping wider arcs now. They had learned something. Good. That meant they were thinking. That meant they would make mistakes. He set up at a new vantage point, this one lower to the ground, more obscured. He steadied his breath, recalibrated his scope, and found his next target. A squad of 3 moved cautiously, their exoskeletal armor shifting colors in an attempt to blend with the surroundings. It was impressive technology, adaptive camouflage, high-energy shielding, sensor-linked targeting systems. Against any conventional force, they would be unstoppable. But Mercer wasn't conventional. He fired again, this time aiming lower. The bullet struck the leading warrior's knee joint, shattering it instantly. The creature screamed, collapsing as its leg buckled, its weapon clattering to the ground. The others whirled toward the source of the shot, raising their weapons. Mercer was already gone. He heard the hiss of plasma, rounds scorching the air where he had been, the heat so intense that even from a distance he could feel it. The Xel'Vorr weren't holding back anymore. They weren't playing gods now. They were reacting like cornered animals, their arrogance crumbling beneath the weight of uncertainty. This was what he needed. They would report this. The ones who survived would carry the fear with them. And fear spread faster than any weapon. It infected minds, weakened resolve, turned warriors into cowards before a battle even began. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ruined battlefield. Mercer had moved half a dozen times, striking and vanishing like a phantom. The Xel'Vorr had stopped advancing. Their formation had tightened, their movements now hesitant. They had given up on marching forward. They were trying to survive. Then something changed. Through his scope, Mercer spotted a new figure emerging from the wreckage. Taller than the rest, its armor thicker, the color shifting in slow, deliberate waves. This one didn't fidget. It didn't scan its surroundings with nervous glances. It walked with purpose. The commander. Mercer exhaled, watching as the leader surveyed the battlefield, its expression unreadable beneath its helmet. The other Xel'Vorr gathered around, listening as it spoke in sharp, clipped tones. A trap was being set. They wanted him to take the shot. He almost admired it. A fake target, positioned just right, the body language rehearsed to mimic vulnerability. It was clever, but it was too late for clever. Mercer ignored the decoy. His crosshairs drifted instead to a figure standing just behind the commander. A second-in-command, perhaps. Important enough to be protected, but not important enough to expect death before his superior. Mercer fired. The alien's head snapped back, a blossom of green mist exploding from the wound. The commander didn't flinch, but the warriors around it did, eyes wide with horror. The trap had failed. The hunter was still out there. The Xel'Vorr were breaking. Mercer could see it in the way they moved, in the hesitation before each step, in the nervous flickers of their eyes as they scanned the darkness for a ghost they would never find. They were elite warriors, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, yet now they clung to cover like frightened recruits, their bodies stiff with the realization that they were prey. He adjusted his rifle, watching from a concealed perch beneath the twisted remains of a collapsed structure. The battlefield had changed. What had once been a proud, methodical invasion force was now a collection of scattered squads, their coordination fraying at the edges. Every kill had chipped away at their confidence. Every unanswered shot had planted deeper seeds of doubt. Fear was setting in, and fear made creatures predictable. A movement to the left. Slow. Careful. One of them, a scout, likely sent ahead to bait him out. Mercer let his scope drift past it. The real threats weren't the ones creeping through the ruins. It was the leader, the one who hadn't flinched when Mercer had shattered his trap. That was the one who needed to die. The Xel'Vorr, war leader of the Xel'Vorr expedition, was unlike the others. Even now, as his soldiers faltered, he stood tall, his posture unshaken, his gaze scanning not with panic, but with calculation. He had abandoned the arrogance of before. This was a creature who had learned. Mercer knew that kind of look. He had seen in men who had survived too many battles to believe in invincibility. This would be his hardest kill yet. The wind shifted, sending a soft trail of dust over Mercer's scope. He adjusted his aim, settling the crosshairs just above the war leader's chest plate. One shot wouldn't be enough. Xel'Vorr's armor was heavier, reinforced. Mercer would need a follow-up. That meant giving away his position. He took a slow breath, let it out. A sudden pulse of energy rippled through the air. A droning hum filled the silence, rising in intensity until his teeth vibrated. Mercer's instincts screamed at him to move. He rolled away just as a searing blue beam lanced through the space where he had been. The ground beneath him blackened, superheated metal twisting from the force of the blast. They had him. Mercer hit the ground running, heart pounding against his ribs. They had triangulated him, forced his hand. A second beam cut through the air to his right, a plasma burst detonating against a shattered wall. Dust and heat roared past him as he dove into the wreckage, forcing himself low, forcing himself still. Heavy footsteps. Multiple. They were closing in. He checked his ammunition. 3 rounds left in the mag. Another 2 in his pouch. That was it. No time to reload. No time for anything but survival. A shadow passed over him. Mercer moved before thought, slamming the butt of his rifle into the Xel'Vorr's knee joint. The alien staggered, snarling, but Mercer was already swinging upward, knife flashing in the dim light. The blade found the soft tissue beneath the warrior's chin, punching through with a wet crunch. The body went limp. The others would have heard that. He took off again, weaving through the ruins, forcing them to follow, forcing them to make mistakes. The Xel'Vorr were fast, stronger, better equipped, but they weren't used to chasing a ghost through a battlefield. A warrior appeared ahead, weapon raised. Mercer didn't slow. He dropped to a knee mid-stride, rifle snapping up. The shot boomed, the .50 caliber round tearing through the alien's skull. The body hit the ground before the echo had even faded. Movement behind him. He spun, but too late, something massive slammed into his side, sending him sprawling. His rifle skidded away as he hit the dirt, rolling onto his back just as Xel'Vorr loomed over him. The war leader's blade gleamed, its edge humming with energy. Mercer barely twisted in time. The blade came down, slicing through the ground inches from his ribs. He kicked upward, striking the alien's arm. It barely budged. The Xel'Vorr were strong, impossibly so. Xel'Vorr's second swing came faster, forcing Mercer to roll aside. He reached for his sidearm, but the war leader's foot came down, pinning his arm to the ground. For the first time, Xel'Vorr spoke directly to him. You are alone. You fight with primitive tools. You are the last flicker of a dying flame. Why do you persist? Mercer gritted his teeth, adjusting his grip on the knife still in his free hand. Because you're bleeding. Xel'Vorr hesitated, his 4 eyes flicking downward. His armor was thick, reinforced, but Mercer had learned its weak points. The bullet he had fired earlier hadn't been a kill shot, but it had done something else. It had cracked the war leader's plating. And Mercer never missed twice. With a surge of strength, he twisted, driving the knife upward with every ounce of force he had left. The blade slid into the damaged armor, finding the soft tissue beneath. Xel'Vorr snarled, staggering back. The pressure on Mercer's arm lifted just enough for him to move. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his pistol, leveled it at the alien's exposed wound, and fired. Xel'Vorr jerked, a burst of green blood spraying the ground. The war leader's body trembled, his legs failing beneath him. He collapsed, hands grasping at the wound as his breathing turned ragged. Mercer stood slowly, chest rising and falling in labored breaths. He holstered his pistol, retrieving his rifle with measured steps. The other Xel'Vorr, the remaining warriors, stood frozen, watching their leader struggle against the inevitable. Mercer chambered around, lined up the final shot. This is what happens, he said, his voice low, steady. When you underestimate us. The rifle cracked one last time. Xel'Vorr's body went still. Silence fell over the battlefield. The Xel'Vorr didn't scream in rage. They didn't charge, didn't fire their weapons. They only stood there, unmoving, staring at the corpse of the leader they had once believed invincible. And then, as one, they began to retreat. It wasn't a coordinated withdrawal. It wasn't strategic. It was fear. Real, undeniable fear. Mercer watched them go, watched as the once proud conquerors abandoned their war machines, their fallen, their very mission. They had come to crush a primitive species beneath their boots, to mock their outdated weapons and obsolete tactics. Instead, they had learned a lesson. Mercer turned away, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. He didn't celebrate. He didn't call for reinforcements. There were none left to call. He was just a man with a gun, and that had been enough.